Thank you for watching. We begin tonight with Dryden as they were struck a hard blow to its largest employer. This week, City Council voted to more than double its large industrial taxes. That move impacts only one property, the Domtar Mill. John Thompson reports.
City Council voted to impose a 134% tax increase for Dryden's Domtar Mill as the city attempts to emerge from a year-long financial crisis. That hoists Domtar's taxes from $853,000 in 2013 up to nearly $2 million in 2014. It will return tax levels to where they were before last year when a property assessment decision saw the mill's value fall from $51 million to $14 million. Domtar's Regional Public Affairs Manager Bonnie Skeen says the company has shed over half its workforce and 2/3 of its buildings are no longer productive. She argues that production was taken into account in reducing the mill's assessment and increasing the tax burden is unfair to the company.
This is a serious competitive disadvantage. The closure of a significant portion of the mill is what triggered the provincial process to reassess the mill. And that's a very rigorous process. And both Domtar and the city invested a lot of time and resource in that process, and you know they've made that process has provided an outcome, and we just really are wanting to ensure that the mill pays industrial tax that are in line with our competitors.
The assessment not only decreased Domtar's taxes by $1 million a year, but demanded Dryden pay the company back $5.4 million in taxes collected since 2009. Dryden Mayor Craig Nuttall says the financial crisis is bringing the city close to provincial intervention, and his council is using every tool at its disposal to ensure its democracy is maintained.
If we had to pay back the total $5.4 million, I have no idea where we get it. And people are saying to me, don't close the pool, don't do this. You know what? If the ministry come over and took us over, they would sit in the mayor's chair and say, okay, there's no pool, there's no library, there's no museum. That is something I will not let happen in my term. We're going to work this out.
While Domtar meets quarterly with all communities in which it does business, the company hasn't met with Dryden since last summer. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Finance says Domtar was, quote, not receptive to a compromise proposal that would have resulted in a smaller municipal tax increase. Even with the increase, according to the ministry, Domtar is actually paying less in taxes than it was in 2007, including 77% less in education taxes, while the mill has received over $50 million in provincial assistance. John Thompson, TBT News.
The OPP believed to have identified the driver of a transport involved in a near-fatal collision on Highway 11 near Nipigon after the incident was caught on video and went viral. It happened last month. The alleged truck driver was attempting to pass a snowplow and almost ended up in a head-on collision with an oncoming tractor-trailer. That vehicle captured the incident through a dashboard camera. The driver was forced to steer his truck onto the guardrails. Meanwhile, the driver of the transport truck continued heading south.
Charges are pending. It is a 31-year-old male from Milton. That's all I can tell you at this time. When charges are actually laid, then we'll be able to release that information when that happens.
The careful examination of this viral video helped the OPP identify the truck driver, and charges will likely be laid. A spirit of resilience is hanging on in Fort Frances as Resolute Forest Products idles its mill indefinitely. Between infrastructure plans and business attraction, the town is exploring a new identity. Dennis Ward has the story.
Resolute indefinitely idled its Fort Frances mill on January 31st, laying off 240 workers. Despite the closure and without a major employer, Fort Frances still has to find over $1 million to pay the mill back in taxes after a drop in the mill's assessment.
It's pretty bad when you see a big facility like we have in town that's idled and you see the wood go by. It hurts a lot of people in the community. This is 100 years. This year would have been 100 years that this paper mill in Fort Frances was built. So it's a pretty good anniversary. We're idling the mill.
Town Council is attempting to maintain services in its 2014 budget despite upcoming collective bargaining negotiations and a looming 2.5% tax increase in policing costs alone. Council identified shelf-ready infrastructure priorities on Tuesday. Those include requesting $1 million to demolish the Rainy Lake Hotel and funding to repave 2 major streets whose applications have failed for 5 years.
having trucks are moving commerce from Dryden, from the mill in Dryden, or the rock from the quarry in Vermilion Bay. All those come down and go through Fort Francis, and they go over our streets. We were only 7,000 people. We can't support the infrastructure of those roads with those heavy trucks, and also all the wood that's going through Fort Francis to go to Ainsworth or going to Thunder Bay. We're paying for that infrastructure, and we can't afford it.
The business community remains optimistic. Mark Caron is the president of the Fort Francis Chamber of Commerce. As the mill goes offline, the chamber is shifting gears to attract large and small industry.
We're looking at it as a temporary setback. It's time for Fort Francis to reinvent itself, be a new Fort Francis. Yes, we did lose our major industry, but I do believe we can move forward and invite new industry into Fort Francis and the surrounding area.
Ben Morelli opened from the grind up across from the mill exactly a year ago. He joined the Chamber of Commerce Directors Board this week, and from a young entrepreneur's perspective, he believes encouraging shopping local can sustain the community.
I think that Northwestern Ontario in general has been fairly resilient in the face of these similar situations. I grew up in Atikokan. Atikokan's seen a few shutdowns themselves, and they're bouncing back now. Kenora in a similar sense. And I think as long as we support existing business within the community and focus on that, we'll come out of it all right.
Resolute will pay laid-off workers until March 15th, but rail, paper, and other industrial companies are already undertaking efforts to relocate laborers. No plans are in place to restart the Fort Francis operation. Dennis Ward, TBT News.
Mayor and council in Greenstone have some tough childcare decisions on the horizon. Municipally run daycares across the province are struggling with declining enrollment and budgets, but smaller centers are taking a really big hit. Greenstone Director of Community Services, Nancy Proteau, says full-day kindergarten started in the municipality years ago, so that hasn't caused the recent troubles. But the weak economy and out-migration of younger families has. The Beardmore Child Care site was shut down a few months ago. However, costs to the taxpayers will continue to rise.
I can tell you that municipally, every year the municipal contribution to keep our centers open is rising significantly. And in 2012, that was well over $300,000 that came out of the municipal tax base. And we are not sure what 2013 has given us because we haven't run the final numbers, but we know it's going to be more than $300,000.
Proteau adds council has been very supportive of municipally run daycares. Currently, there are no other licensed childcare spots in Greenstone.
The municipality pulls out, there is no other game in town. Where in larger urban centers, there may be another option for families. In some of our communities, our licensed centers are the only childcare option. So if we pull out, then there isn't anybody that's going to pick up and start providing childcare to children.
Council has yet to have a hard and fast discussion on childcare. Proteau expects further declines in enrollment unless the economic situation improves. Scriber has appealed to the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation to start over and reassess every one of the 800 properties in their community. John Thompson is following that story for us.
It's the opposite story from the one you've heard about MPAC. Scriber has seen crashing property values, some homes falling from $100,000 to less than $10,000 in their 2013 assessments. But for 67-year-old widow Josephine Camisso, her home's value dropped only $20,000 from where it was 5 years ago, meaning her share of the tax levy actually went up to over $6,000 a year. She had hoped to retire 2 years ago, and her granddaughter's getting married in Southern Ontario this week. But between the $200 she pays each month in hydro, along with more than $500 in taxes, she can't afford to make the trip.
I could survive better. I could do a lot better if I'd sell the house and move into something smaller. But for me to sell the house, I would have to give it away. Nobody's going to buy a house that size, and nobody's going to want to pay that taxes a year.
Scriber has filed a formal request with MPAC to reevaluate all 800 properties in the community after the town's administration found what it calls significant errors in almost half the assessments. Scriber Mayor Don MacArthur owns the restaurant where Camisso cooks. He says despite having instituted only a 2.3% tax increase, those who saw neutral or slightly decreasing values saw their taxes increase by as much as 10 to 12%.
It's difficult. I mean, one of the difficulties for council is that those people that saw significant drops, right? I mean, everybody loves to see their taxes go down, right? And certainly we don't want to take anything away from anybody, right? But on the other hand, if it isn't fair, then we want our goal as council is to see everyone pay their fair share and no more.
Without a large industry to draw from, Scriber's tax burden has fallen on the businesses and residents. And while Impact confirms it will take a broad review of properties in the township this year, the results won't take effect until the next assessment update in 2016. John Thompson, TBT News.
Terrace Bay has produced a new housing plan projecting that 250 new properties need to be built in the next decade. As John Thompson reports, a generational shift is driving the trend.
Cribbage games help pass the afternoon at the Terrace Bay Senior Center. They've pegged through years of home ownership, but the need for new cribs is close at hand. Karen Morley is the center's program coordinator. She worked for the town when the last housing units were built 35 years ago and says the needs of the baby boomers are changing.
Some kind of condos or apartments where there would be a little bit of assistance, maybe a dining room, like that level of help. Where we can get away from doing the yard maintenance and all that kind of stuff, and but still be living independently, because I think the majority of our seniors that belong to this club are still pretty active and engaged in things.
The Thunder Bay District Social Services Board rejected a proposal that would have constructed a 10-unit supportive housing project this year. Terrace Bay has gone back to the drawing board, painting a landscape of 250 dwellings to be built over 10 years, from low-income duplexes to intermediate seniors' residences to executive housing planned for the harborfront in Hydro Bay. Jody Davis built his home in 1979. The newly appointed mayor of Terrace Bay says the housing needs have been stable for the past few decades due to a generation lost to outmigration. But with 50% of the labor market retiring over the next decade, the plan is positioning the town for the next generation.
Not only at the mill, but around town, there are a lot of people in the retirement stages, and we need young people to replace them. Not only at the mill, at Spadoni Motors, at the hospital, the little businesses in town, they need young people to replace them. So the retirement gap is pretty evident.
The trend of plummeting student enrollment in schools has turned the corner. Between the Terrace Bay Mills reopening and the looming health needs of an aging population, Town Manager Carmelo Nardabolo says the challenge will be attracting developers and funding before the development wave breaks.
We currently have 100% occupancy in our multi-residential buildings. We have very minimal housing supply for sale. And the mill keeps telling us on a daily basis they can't attract professionals because they don't have anywhere to live in Terrace Bay. It doesn't get any more urgent than that.
As ambitious as the plan sounds, it's based on a conservative rise in the local economy. Without promoting itself as such, Terrace Bay is becoming a retirement community. Now it's up to mayor and council to promote the housing need as a generational shuffle. John Thompson, TBT News.
A contract dispute between the city of Dryden and its police service will be in front of an arbitrator this coming week. We have the latest on the talks coming up after the break. Well, for the first time in a long time, an arbitrator will decide a collective bargaining deal between the Dryden Police Association and its board. Both sides will begin presenting their arguments next week. John Thompson reports.
The contract for Dryden Police Service officers and staff expired in December of 2012. The negotiations that began in June have broken down between the board and its officers. Now the two sides will begin arbitration on February 10th. Board Chair Peter Andrusko says his side isn't looking for a staff reduction to the complement of 15 officers, but argues constraint is necessary as Dryden navigates its financial crisis.
Certainly the economics of the time here in Dryden is playing into this because the city only has X number of tax dollars, and we're trying to run the police force and other parts of the city, and so money is an issue.
The last contract was a 3% increase per year over 3 years. Dryden Mayor Craig Nuttall says the Officers Association has led the path to arbitration, and the city is hoping its economic trials will be a compelling argument to keep its costs down.
This is what they want, so we'll go to arbitration and see what the best deal we can possibly get.
What was the city offering?
I can't really tell you right now, but it wasn't what the OPP gets at 8%, I'll tell you that.
Ann Tachik has negotiated 4 deals over 12 years on behalf of the Police Association.
We have always had an excellent working relationship with the board. Obviously, lots of things have happened in the last couple of years that have created, and money is an issue. We understand that money is an issue. So this will be my first time in an interest arbitration where an arbitrator is going to decide what happens and what the awards are.
At issue is the severance pay for over a dozen laid-off dispatch workers in the communications center, which the board intends to outsource to the Owen Sound Police. Tachik says outside voices are going to decide the fate of those workers in 2 different procedures, and at this point, no one knows for sure what the costs or savings are going to be. John Thompson, TBT News.
A group of NDP members of Parliament departed Friday for a tour of the Ring of Fire. They say the development represents a huge opportunity, not just for the Northwest, but for all of Canada. And they're pushing the Harper government to take a stronger leadership role in the project. On Thursday, the group held an open house in Thunder Bay in advance of their tour. Dennis Ward reports.
Members of the federal NDP started their Ring of Fire tour in Thunder Bay. They met with the Mattawa Tribal Council on Thursday prior to holding a town hall meeting. For the 6 opposition critics, this trip will take them as far north as they've ever been. John Rafferty says the goal is to speak to as many different groups as possible, and that's already been happening.
We've heard a number of things so far from various groups. Business, for example, is saying, we need the federal government to backstop some kind of transportation route, some kind of road or railroad or something like that.
Nickel Belt MP Claude Gravel feels the Ring of Fire is both a provincial and federal matter. He chairs the federal opposition's mining caucus and feels the development needs to get back on track.
We have to decide, first of all, is it going to be a road? Is it going to be a railroad? How are we going to develop it? We have to make a plan for the whole region. We have to make a major plan, and from that major plan, we have to develop smaller plans for the First Nations and the communities.
The federal politicians will be joined by provincial NDP MPP Michael Mantha. He's visited communities and mining camps in the far north before. It was difficult for him as a father to see the conditions people are living in.
When they hear Ring of Fire, they also think about housing, they also think about education, they also think about healthcare. So these are very much connected. It's a very large puzzle, and each one of these small pieces has a place, and it's to make sure that we're going to do this properly.
Mantha feels both levels of government have a role to play in helping the Ring of Fire develop, but he says the province must take the lead and believes things have stalled because the province put all of its eggs in one basket with Cliffs Natural Resources. Dennis Ward, TBT News.
The energy for new mines and remote First Nations needs to be generated in the north, according to progressive conservative finance critic Vic Fedeli. Fedeli was in Dryden and Kenora on Wednesday alongside Kenora Rainy River PC candidate Randy Nickel on a tour leading into the provincial Liberal budget. He says the concern he has heard most from Northerners is the rising cost of electricity. Fedeli claims Ontario pays $500 million a year for Quebec and the United States to take excess power from southern Ontario, while northern Ontario doesn't generate enough power to meet its needs. New companies building mines that are off of the current grid, he argues, shouldn't be asked to plan for that power to be generated from diesel.
with a mine that wants to build a power plant of 17 to 25 megawatts out of diesel. Good heavens, in this day and age, the real solution is generating power here, transmitting it to the Ring of Fire, but powering up the First Nations along the way.
Well, stay with us. A backyard ice castle in Dryden has caught the attention of people from around the world. We have that story coming up after the break. A Dryden man's unique ice sculpture has gone viral.
It sort of took off in a way that I never imagined possible.
This backyard ice castle Chris Marchand built for his daughter was posted on the website Reddit in January at the height of the polar vortex. The photos have received nearly 800,000 hits on the social media site Imgur and have also reposted on at least 20 major sites, including the New York Daily Times, Good Morning America, Cottage Life, and Viral Nova. Marchand, editor of the Dryden newspaper, turned the sculpture into a local story by hosting a grade 5 math class in his yard. They estimated the castle at around 400 blocks and its water volume at 3,200 liters. The students then calculated the water cost of making the palace, and the results surprised Marchand as much as the attention his castle received.
Complain about water bills, and it turned out to be about $11.50 in water, and you know, I ran a bucket in my kitchen sink for an hour a day for a month, and you know, it amounted to next to nothing.
Marchand intends to hold a betting pool as the castle melts in the spring, which he plans to record in time-lapse photography. Well, thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time.